laughing at me. I am her clown. She meets me in the square, tells me with a stare, she has no need for me. I know better. She has her devotion, driven and sure. She knows I am simple reason, and I don't understand much more than I know. She meets me in the square, and tells me with a stare, she has no need for me. She meets me in the square, tells me with a stare, she has no need. She has no need for me. 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 For me. She has no need for me. For me. She has no need for me. She has no need for me. For me. She has no need. She has no need. But I know better. Thank you so much, Eric. Well, I got to admit something, Eric. I'm a little bit jealous. I wish I had your voice. Maybe when you're not looking, I'll sneak over there and steal some voice from you. So, anyway, now is time. What we do, we call it community moment. A community moment is one of our members of the community gives a nice short 10 minutes, supposed to be 10-minute talk, on something personal in their life. It could be a topic. It could be something that you want to share with other people. And when you get up here and talk, it benefits yourself, but also benefits other people, right? And today we have someone that I like to call our quintessential community moment person. He's probably done more community moments through the years at Oasis than anybody that I know. And that would be Lew Kana. So Lew, come on up. And I even pronounced your last name right. So Lew is going to talk about the latest in scams and their resolution. Thank you, Lew.
Morning, everybody. This is the third of 3 presentations on the same subject that I've done. This stuff never stops. And hopefully later on this year there'll be an opportunity to do another presentation. The first 2 were the first 2 weeks of January, and they are already on YouTube. And this one should be on YouTube within a day or two. Okay.
BS5.
Okay. All right. Came pretty close to losing all my data. And I was on the phone with someone, I think it was AT&T, and they wanted me to take control of my computer. And I said, yeah, maybe not. So I called up Gary Richardson, who's the guy who built my PC. And he said, don't do it. So, one way to be sure about this is to get the phone number off your bill and call people up and go through that, tell them somebody there needs to have control of my computer. You don't absolutely positively know who's on the other end. Once they've got control of the computer, it should be fine. Okay. All right. Again, the guy who built my computer recommended that even though I have Windows 11 on my machine, which has some pretty good virus protection, I should add to that with a program called malware, which I purchased, cost about $50. And it finds and removes viruses from iPhone, PC, whatever. So it's my impression that if you have Windows 11 and malware runs, you're in pretty good, you've been protected. Now, malware doesn't have all the power that AVG does and other kind of mainstream antivirus packages. But the price is right. Okay. I've talked to you before about my pal Marianne Van Zell, who has a program on scams on National Geographic. And her latest program talked about this. The Center for Lottery Scams are the call centers in back of Montego Bay, which is like the tourist queen or king of Jamaica. Scammers have call centers in back of the beach, and they make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, which is nothing about what happens in Tel Aviv. Okay. So, the Center for Financial Scams, in other words, they call you up and say, you should invest in something. That's in Tel Aviv. Those folks are making billions of dollars a year. So in both cases, the folks in Montego Bay and in Tel Aviv, they've given up on the drug business. Right? It's, the penalties for getting caught dealing drugs are pretty severe. It's pretty hard to catch these guys and girls. So, okay. All right. A lot of the information that I have gathered has been on the web, and you can find out a lot of information by going into any browser in this order: Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and go up to the top box and type in the word scams, and you'll have enough reading material for days. This is in addition to going to bbb.org, which has a separate section for scams. Okay. all.
All right, so we really would like to see more people involved in different activities here. And I'm going to go over all the many announcements later because we're trying to press the time today. So if you have a community moment you want to share, get with anybody. Let's see, Brina, one of our vice presidents, and we have all of us, anybody on the board come to us and come to Brina and tell us that you'd like to do a community moment. We'll get you on the schedule for sure. Now this is a time when we have probably the most enjoyable time. At least for me, this is where we break down for 10 minutes for coffee, food, refreshments, and conversation. That's why people come to groups, one of the main reasons, to be together. So I think Verena, you did 9 minutes and 59 seconds last week. I'm going to beat you. I'm going to say, how about 10 minutes and 25 seconds? No, okay. Okay. Yeah, let's do about 10 minutes. So feel free to get up, mingle, talk to people, go out and get some refreshments, and we'll get back here in approximately 10 minutes at about 11. Thank you.
One second.
So now I think that's what I was doing already.
State University, San Marcos, not too far away. And you're going to be talking about free exercise clause, establishment clause, and the First Amendment. So, welcome to Oasis, Dr. Laycock. Come on up.
Everybody, thanks so much for inviting me to this. This is really cool. I've never seen a secular group do a Sunday gathering like this before. It's when we teach world religion, we use a book called Religion Matters, and the very last chapter is about secular movements. And there's a description of a group like this, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. So it's really cool. Thanks so much for inviting me here. Thank you. Yeah, at Texas State University, I teach a class called American Religious Controversies. It's a new major. We just created it. A lot of what I've been asked to do is to kind of get butts in seats, get students to sign up for a religious studies class. One way to do that is to have over-the-top PowerPoint titles like this. But constitutional law, especially around the First Amendment issues of religion, is a lot of weird, wild stuff. But also something that people are very, very misinformed about. This is from The Onion, right? So everyone knows The Onion is a satirical newspaper, but satire often points to truth, right? All of my students, whether they're very, very liberal or they're very, very conservative, they all love the Constitution, right? They all think this is a document that needs to be defended, but the other side doesn't understand it, the other side does not take seriously. Unfortunately, the situation in the United States is most Americans are totally illiterate about the Constitution. To some extent, that's not their fault, right? People read it, and it doesn't really give you a sense of how these words have been interpreted by the Supreme Court and by other groups of people. And it's dangerous to have that illiteracy, right? There are sort of bad actors in politics who can kind of appeal to people's ignorance or their misconceptions and try to use that for political purposes. Here is a survey where they just ask people what freedoms are in the First Amendment, right? There's these freedoms outlined in the First Amendment. The one that most people knew, but still less than half of Americans, was speech, right? I could say any darn thing I want, right? People knew that, right? And then freedom of religion, only 15% of people in the survey knew that was one of the freedoms in the First Amendment. And so I mentioned kind of manipulating people and using their kind of lack of knowledge about these issues to sell a very different narrative. This is a painting by a conservative Christian artist, very talented artist, but this is Jesus handing the Constitution to the American people, right? Yeah, my students have the same reaction when we look at this. And there's a lot going on. They give me a laser pointer. So here's the Supreme Court realizing that all of their interpretations were wrong all along. You got veterans over here. You've got Ben Franklin, George Washington, and so on, right? Thomas Jefferson, before the American Revolution, he wrote a law about church taxes in Virginia, right? In Virginia, you had to pay taxes to support the Church of England. The assumption was the church was for everybody, like roads and police. You got to pay your share, whether you're Church of England or not. If you're not Church of England, you're in the wrong colony, right? You got to move somewhere else, right? And Thomas Jefferson said that this is sinful and tyrannical, right? He opposed this law. But his words are very choice here, right? It's tyrannical. People should not be forced to do things that go against their conscience. But it's also sinful. It's corrupting the church, right? To have this connection. And so obviously this is not where the Constitution came from. It was created in a big, noisy meeting, and then they had to amend it, right? But it's not a perfect document. It was a document meant to be changed and updated because the Founding Fathers understood that they make mistakes, right? And so if you are a Christian and you believe Jesus was perfect, well, now you're kind of blaming him for all of the sort of human flaws in the document. So I think this is an example of a very bad history and legal theory, but also bad theology, right? So it is both sinful and tyrannical, the way that Jefferson described. So the first, I have this framed in my classroom where I teach world religion, and I point out it all the time. So here's what it says. This is the first part of this. The Congress shall make a law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It's very short. It's just clauses. But out of this, we get two very important things. So the so-called establishment clause of the separation of church and state. Sometimes people who don't like the separation of church and state say, you know, that phrase is not in the Constitution, right? That is true. However, the establishment clause is the basis of that. And Thomas Jefferson wrote this letter to the Danbury Baptists who were worried about their religious freedom being taken away because at that time period, Baptists were a minority religion. And he said, don't worry, there is this wall of separation. We'll protect those sides. So that limits the government sort of having an official religion. In Europe, a lot of Western democracies in Europe do have an official religion, right? So
we're the Church of Norway or something is our official religion, and we have religious freedom. You can choose whatever you want. What sociologists have noticed is Christianity is kind of dying out in Europe, and especially up in Scandinavian countries where there are official Christian religions encoded in law. America is the opposite, right? We have no official religion. We're a secular government, and yet Americans tend to be very, very religious compared to Europe, right? So some sociologists have said it seems to be something about having a secular government actually encourages this kind of a religious fervor, right, or competition between churches, right? The other clause here is the free exercise clause, right? You are free to practice your religion, and as we'll see, what it actually means to have freedom of religion has changed a lot. In most European countries, freedom of religion just simply means you are free to practice whatever religion you wish. You're free to believe in it. You're free to tell other people about it and so forth. You're not allowed to actually break the law or do anything we wouldn't normally let you do as part of your religion. In the United States, religious freedom is taken much more seriously, right? You can actually get around certain laws and things like that depending on your religion, and I'll look at some of the cases where that was discussed. Okay, one thing that's really interesting here, right, is what counts as a religion, right? So the Constitution just said, the government can't have a religion, they can't promote a religion, they can't detract from a religion, and you have freedom to do what you want if it's part of your religion. What it never does is say what is a religion, right? What counts as a religion? And the Supreme Court has never taken this on. The Supreme Court has never said to be a religion you must have the following things. I think because they know as soon as we do that, people will be able to game the system, right? If we leave it vague, if we never actually say what we mean by religion, that kind of gives us some more leeway, right? I teach another class in addition to American religious controversies called What is Religion? Because I really want students to think about this, because this also becomes part of kind of the political games that we play. The closest thing that we have in the government to deciding whether or not something is a religion is the IRS, right? The IRS didn't want the job, but they got the job, right? And the IRS, their criteria for deciding whether or not your religion is kind of like the old Jeff Foxworthy routine, you might be a redneck, right? So they have a list of things, and if you fit some of the things, not necessarily all of them, they will say, well, now you're a church, right? A church is not exactly the same thing as a religion, right? You could potentially say that something is violating your religious conscience even if you were not part of an organization with this IRS status. The other thing that comes up a lot is a lot of people would say, well, I don't care what the IRS says. I do not recognize that as a religion. I don't think that's a religion. The most classic example of this is the Church of Scientology, which was declared not to be a religion by the IRS, and then in 1993 there was a sort of long protracted struggle, and there was a sort of truce where the IRS said, okay, we will accept that you're a church if you pay such amount in back taxes, right? So a lot of people who are not Scientologists say this organization, whatever it is, it's not a religion. They say that they are. On the other side of the spectrum, you have groups like Transcendental Meditation. Most people say that seems like that's a religious thing. You're meditating, and they say, no, we are not a religion. This is science. Right? So religion is to some extent in the eye of the beholder. Let me see if this will play for us or not. All right, I'm gonna skip the clips because I think I could be entertaining enough without it. But this is a case that we cover in even world religion to kind of get students to think about this category. But this is a group called the Church of Body Modification, right? The Church of Body Modification started with an employee at Costco who had an eyebrow piercing. And they said, you can't have that, you're freaking out the customers. Right? Some people who shop at Costco aren't used to seeing piercings, you gotta take it out. And they came back and said, I'm a member of the Church of Body Modification, and this is my religious freedom. It's persecuting me if you make me take this out at work. And so it started as kind of an attempt to game the system. Over time, though, it became more serious. So there was a case a few years ago where a high school girl had a nose stud, and that was against the dress code at the public school that she attended. And she said, well, but there is, in the student handbook, it says there are exemptions to the dress code for religious purposes. So Muslim women can wear hijab, for example, even though hats are not normally allowed indoors. And it got more complicated because this girl's mother came in and she said, yes, our family our Church of Body Modification. That is our family faith. And here's our pastor. And the pastor came in, who was very heavily tattooed. And the school said, absolutely not, you're gaming the system. And she was suspended from school for 100 days, and it went to court. In the end, the court said, we don't think it's the job of the school to decide what counts as a religion and what doesn't, and therefore, you have to let her have the piercing, right? It was kind of an interesting way of solving it. But this is something to think about, right? How people go about defining what counts as a religion and what's at stake in whether or not your group defines itself this way. Oh, here we go. Whoops. Oh, I had everything and then it stopped working. All right, let me try one more time. I'm going to click this button here. Could I get some technical assistance? If it seems like it's going to work for me if I can just figure out which button to hit. It looks different from back here.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do this. Where's your mic?
I don't just know how to make it start. Do I hit?
Yeah, I think that's it.
No.
Starting to.
It was starting? Try it one more time.
Tattoos and piercings mean different things to different people. Some is literally a religion.
We believe that the mind, body, and soul are all one entity, and that by modifying the body, you can bring the mind and soul into harmony.
Richard Ivy is a minister in the Church of Body Modification, which he says is federally accredited. Among its members, Nikki Iacono and her daughter Ariana.
The purpose of my nose ring is basically, it makes me kind of feel whole.
Small as it is, that nose stud has enormous implications. Because of it, Ariana has been suspended from Clayton High School. It violates the dress code, but it's in keeping with Ariana's religion. The stud itself isn't sacred, but its meaning is.
I was abused for years when I was younger, and I have really low self-esteem, and it kind of helps me look at myself in a better way.
A spokesperson for the school had only this to say on camera.
It's a matter of student record, and we cannot discuss it.
Off camera, we were told the district's lawyer had researched the church and made the judgment call that the nose stud wasn't necessary to the religion. To the Iaconos and their minister, that just shows a lack of understanding. What they say is offensive is that school policy does allow for exceptions to the dress code if students have sincerely held religious beliefs.
They're basically being told that because the principal doesn't respect their religious beliefs, that he doesn't believe that it can be sincerely held. And that's ludicrous.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate the assist from everybody. So an assignment that I actually give to my students is come up with a definition of what you think religion is. Tell me how all the other religions we've studied in class, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, so on, fit that. And then tell me whether or not the Church of Body Modification fits the definition that you wrote. So if you're going to say it's not a religion, tell me what it lacks that these other traditions have. And I'm not grading them on how they answer the question. I'm grading them on whether or not they can be consistent, right? So sometimes they'll say things like, well, religion is about feeling very spiritual. And then they'll say, this isn't a real religion. So, but the woman just said she feels very spiritual. So why isn't it, right? Is there something else, right? And it's sort of forcing people to kind of question where their assumptions about these things come from. Okay, but the point is that the Constitution incentivizes us to define certain things or certain aspects of culture as either religion or not religion in particular ways. And this is a kind of game that people play. And once you see how the game is played, it's very obvious to see the moves and the way that people talk about these topics. So here's an example. Common sense would say Islam is a religion. I've never heard of a religious studies class, a world religion class that does not cover Islam. But I see Islamophobic memes like this that say Islam is not a religion, right? It's something else. It's a hate group, it's a political system or whatever. It's not a religion. As a religion scholar, I think, well, lots of hate groups are religions. Lots of political systems are religions. All religions have political implications. This is a fallacy of a kind of either-or thing, right? It can only be one or the other. Interestingly, a lot of people who would say Islam is not really a religion, we've been tricked into thinking it's a religion, will say the Harry Potter novels, though, are a religion, right? Because Harry Potter is promoting witchcraft, and witchcraft is a religion, and therefore having some Harry Potter books in a school library where children can read them, that is an illegal government establishment of religion, right? That is promoting the religion of witchcraft, and it's illegal. So, Islam, not a religion. Harry Potter is a religion, right? I have literally met people who have said both of these things are true, right? And so the definition, it's not about sort of how they're thinking about things conceptually, it's about where they're trying to get to, right? How are they trying to steer the two clauses of the Constitution to get the outcome that they want? So I made this chart, and this kind of just shows how the move is going, right? So for sake of argument, let's say you are a Christian theocrat, and you would like to use the power of the government to kind of impose your religious beliefs onto others and to silence those from different religions. So if you're doing it and you want it in the government, right, you have to say it's not religion, right? So what you might do is you want to put up a 10 Commandments monument. Well, it can't be religion, so what are you going to do? You can say it's history, right? This is this important commemoration of our history, right? Or in Missouri, they had an abortion law that said human life begins at conception, right? People challenged that law, and they said that's a religious claim, right? That claim is coming from your religious beliefs, right? And they said, no, it's science, right? It's a happy coincidence that our Christian faith agrees very strongly with this scientific view of conception. But if somebody else wants to put up a monument, right, or somebody else wants to kind of encode one of their values into law, you say, no, that's religion. It's not allowed, right? Now, let's say this is your rivals doing it, right? If your rivals want to put up a monument, you say it's religion. If they're saying this is my religious freedom, right, then you have to frame what they're doing as not religion, as something else. And you could say this is a political ideology, like that Islamophobic meme that we looked at. This is destructive cultism. This is madness, or something else. But there are ways to play the game where by how you define things, you can make the argument that your group gets religious freedom and your opponents do not. Your group gets to be in the government and your opponents do not. And once you see this, it's very, very obvious, right? But you have to stop and think about it for just a moment. Okay, so let's talk a little about the free exercise clause. Okay, a really interesting example of the free exercise clause, and maybe one of the starkest, is the Church of Lukumi Babaluaye in 1993 versus the city of Hialeah, Florida. So there is a religion called Santeria. You may have heard of it, right? When enslaved people were taken from West Africa to the Caribbean, they continued to practice their West African religion as best they could. In the island of Cuba, it was illegal, so they would practice it underground and often kind of disguise it and blend it with Catholicism, and it created this religion called Santeria. A part of Santeria, especially in Cuba, is animal sacrifice, right? Particularly killing chickens and things like this and offering their blood to the gods of Africa, essentially, right? So under Castro, Santeria was illegal, and as Cubans begin sort of fleeing the Castro regime and they end up in Florida, you have a situation where in Hialeah, Florida, the city council are mostly Cubans. They're mostly Cubans who fled communism, and then you get the arrival of Santeros, people from Cuba who practice the Santeria religion. They open a little church called the Church of Lukumi Babaluaye. Lukumi, a Spanish word for the gods of Africa. Babaluaye, a particular god associated particularly with protection from diseases, right? Staying healthy, right? And so they begin sacrificing these chickens, and it's more or less not different from something you would find on an organic farm. You know, they're from Cuba. They know how to cook a chicken for dinner, right? They slit its throat and everything, and they do their ceremonies. The Christian Cubans really did not like this happening in their city, right? And what was very striking is one of them said, "This religion wasn't allowed under Castro, and I'll be damned if it's allowed here." Just think about that for a second, right? So they pass a law saying it's illegal in the city of Hialeah to kill an animal for ritual purposes, right? Now, you could still kill animals in all kinds of ways in Hialeah. You could buy a lobster and take it home and boil it, right? There was a dog track, and every morning to make the greyhounds practice their running, they'd throw a live rabbit out, and the dogs would run it down. You could do all kinds of things to animals except kill it in a ritual, right? So this goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decides unanimously, 9-0, this is not acceptable, right? You made this law particularly to take away these people's ability to practice their religion. That was the only reason you wrote this law. It's not a constitutional law, freedom of religion, right? Antonin Scalia, who I've met once, a very, very conservative Catholic, even said in his opinion, so when I saw Scalia kind of speaking not as Supreme Court justice, he said, speaking not as Supreme Court justice, I don't think world religion classes should be taught to students because they give the message that there is more than one religion it's acceptable to belong to. Right? Scalia was a Catholic, traditionalist Catholic, would drive hours to see a Latin Mass every Sunday. But in his opinion, he said, you know, I really don't like these people sacrificing their chickens. And if you guys had worded this law in any other way to kind of conceal your contempt for them, I could have let this slide. But there was just no way for me to let this go forward, right, with this concept of freedom of religion, right? What if, though, your religion asks you to do something that's already illegal, right? It was already illegal before you started doing this. The first case to do this involved the Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, 1878. There were all sorts of laws banning polygamy, polygamous marriages, right? And they made more and more of those laws in response to the growth of the Mormon Church. So George Reynolds was a secretary to Brigham Young. Brigham Young was Joseph Smith's successor. He had 55 wives. And George Reynolds turned himself in and said, I'm a polygamist. I broke these laws. And he appeals it, and they go to the Supreme Court. And he tells the Supreme Court, look, I know you think that this is just about us having lots of fun in the bedroom, basically, with all our different wives. That's not what this is about. We believe, sincerely, that our place in the afterlife is determined by having multiple wives and having lots and lots of children. My salvation is at stake, right? And you wrote in the Constitution that I can have the free exercise of my religion. So you have to make some kind of exceptions to all these polygamy laws for people like me. And here's what here's what the Supreme Court says in response. They say, laws are made for the government of actions. While they cannot interfere with their mere religious belief and opinions, they may with practices. So you're free to believe. You got to do all this stuff to get to heaven, but not to do it, right? Suppose one believed that human sacrifices were a necessary part of religious worship. Would it be seriously contended that the civil government under which he lived could not interfere or prevent a sacrifice? This is a legitimate question, right? If you were, some sort of Aztec or something like this, right? Or if a wife religiously believed it was her duty to burn herself upon the funeral pyre of her dead husband, would it be beyond the power of the civil government to prevent her carrying out her belief into practice? To permit this would be to make the professed doctrines of religious belief superior to the law of the land, and in effect to permit every citizen to become a law unto himself. This is a good point, right? If everybody can just sort of make up their own religion with its own rules, how do you have a society, right? How do you have a government, right? So that was how they interpreted this. Now, what I'm going to show you is the interpretation of religious freedom has changed since then, and some constitutional lawyers have said we're actually getting more into this danger described in this case, right, where our laws have kind of become a Swiss cheese. I personally don't think we're there yet. I personally think there are reasonable accommodations, but I want to kind of show what some of the issues are. Okay, Employment Division v. Smith, 1990. This is Alfred Leo Smith. He is a native of the Klamath Nation of Oregon. And he was hired for a rehab program. Alcoholism was a problem on the reservation, and this counseling agency said, you are a First Nations person. We would like you to come and work for us and help other Native people who want to get clean, right, who are dealing with addiction issues. And so he takes this job. Now, when he's not at work, he is taking peyote, right? He is taking a hallucinogenic cactus as part of his traditional religion. They find out about this and they fire him, right? They say, look, this is a drug rehab facility. You're doing illegal drugs, right? You were fired with cause. Well, he goes to the Supreme Court and says, but this is part of my religion, right? And I didn't just make this up. This has been a ceremony that my people have done for a very long time. So here's our friend Antonin Scalia again. And he says, I'm going to tell you what basically this court told the Mormons, right, 100 years ago. He says, we've never held that an individual's religious beliefs excuse him from compliance with an otherwise valid law prohibiting conduct that the state is free to regulate. In other words, nobody can do peyote, and that includes you. I'm sorry this is your religion. It says, on the contrary, the record of more than a century of the free exercise jurisprudence contradicts that proposition. And he was correct about this, right? And he even said in his opinion, look, I'm just the judge. If you want a special compensation for Native people to do peyote, take it up with your state legislature, right? I don't write the laws, I just interpret them. But a lot of Americans watch this case and they say, wait a second, this sounds like religious freedom doesn't really mean anything. It just means you can believe stuff, you can't do anything. And if they could do it to this Native American, how long before they can do it to my religion? And so there is bipartisan effort to strengthen the law to improve religious freedom. So in 1993, something gets signed into law called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or for short, RFRA. And so under RFRA, they actually strengthen this. They say the government cannot burden the free exercise of religion unless two conditions are met. So number one, there has to be a compelling government interest, right? So in the example that we looked at of if you believe you have to sacrifice human beings to make the sun rise or something like this, the government would say, well, but we have a compelling interest to not let you kill our citizens, right? So we're not gonna let you do that. Second, if they do restrict it, they have to do it in kind of the least restrictive way possible. They have to try to meet you halfway if there's a way they can do that and still get their goal, right? So an example of this, so usually this doesn't change much because usually the government does have a compelling interest. They don't make up laws for no reason, right? Usually they can give a reason, but in some cases they can't. So Holt v. Hobbs, right, this was a Muslim prisoner, and he said, I need to have a 1/4-inch beard. And in his interpretation of Islam, he said Muslims need to have a 1/4-inch beard. The warden of the prison said, nope, no beard. Beards are not allowed in prison. And he sued, right? And the Supreme Court said, okay, well, what's your compelling interest for not letting him grow a beard? And they said, well, if he escaped, he could shave it, and then we wouldn't find him. And they said, well, why don't you take a picture of him now before he grows the beard, and you have that, and then problem solved. They said, but he could hide things in his beard. And this got into kind of discussion of how much can you fit, right, in a 1/4-inch beard, and they said, where do prisoners hide stuff now? And they said, well, in their hair and their butt and all kinds of places, right? But the beard would be one more place. And so the Supreme Court said, you don't have a compelling interest here. You have to let him grow his beard. These are not good excuses. Here's Samuel Alito. It's hard to swallow the argument that denying petitioner a 1/4 or 1/2-inch beard actually furthers the department's interest in rooting out contraband. So there are cases where under RFRA the government cannot show a compelling interest. Hobby Lobby, y'all have probably heard of this case, right? Hobby Lobby was a very complicated case, but the big issue that determined it was RFRA, was this RFRA law, right, which applies to the federal government. So the Supreme Court ruled 5-4. So this was hotly divided, right? This came down to one opinion. So the Affordable Care Act says you have to provide health insurance if you have so many employees. It has to be quality health care. Part of the definition of quality health care is all of these contraceptives that are approved by the FDA have to be available if employees would like to have them. They have to be covered by their insurance, right? And the Hobby Lobby, which is owned by the Green family, said, we believe that 2 of these products are causing abortions and that this is actually killing people, right? And there were medical doctors who wrote to the Supreme Court and they said, well, the Greens are misinformed. These drugs don't do what they think they do. And the justices actually said, that doesn't matter. All that matters is that they believe these products have these effects, right? Which was controversial, right? So here's how this actually went. So there was this kind of a series of blocks that they went through. So the block on the left, first of all, is Hobby Lobby a person with religious freedom, right? It's a corporation. It's a closely held corporation, but it is a corporation. So some justices said absolutely not, but some said yes. So if you say yes, it goes on to the next block, right? Does the requirement to provide health insurance contraceptives substantially burden the employer, right? So some justices said, no, right? Hobby Lobby can still do whatever they want as part of their religion. The claim that it was is say, yeah, but they're laying awake at night thinking about all these Hobby Lobby employees taking these very particular birth control devices, right? So you're burdening their conscience, right? If you buy that, then it goes to number 3. Does the government have a compelling interest to provide insurance coverage? Almost everybody said yes, right? That was the whole point of the Affordable Care Act, was to get people quality health care. The government does have a compelling interest to do this, even if Hobby Lobby doesn't like it. So then everything comes down to that last box, right? Is the government meeting the compelling interest in the least restrictive way? And this is what ultimately determined the Hobby Lobby case. They said, well, honestly, if the government's goal is to make sure employees at Hobby Lobby can get these products that they need covered by insurance, then the easiest way to do that is to just pay for it, right? Just have the government pay for it, right? Don't have Hobby Lobby pay for it. And that was the compromise that they made, right? Was to have it settled by a separate fund, right? Here's Samuel Alito again. He's really proud of this decision, right? That we're just going to pay for it out of a separate fund. And he says, the effect of the HHS created accommodation on women employed by Hobby Lobby would be precisely zero. So in other words, look, if these women want these products, they can get them. If they work for Hobby Lobby, no problem, right? Under that accommodation, these women should be entitled to all FDA-approved contraceptives without cost sharing. And so Hobby Lobby, you don't have to lay awake at night worrying about your money paying for these things because your money isn't paying for it. Government's paying for it, right? Now, the University of Notre Dame, a Catholic university, said, well, we also are, we don't believe anybody should have access to any sort of abortion, and we have employees, and we don't think this is good enough. We don't want them to get it anyway from the government or from us or from anybody, and they lost their case, right? They said the fact that people work for the University of Notre Dame does not mean that you get to deny them access to certain forms of health care completely. Okay, the Establishment Clause, this is the other side of it, right? This is a former Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. He was the first Attorney General for Trump, one of many. He went through them very quickly. Now, I talk about this with my students because this is a claim that comes up sometimes. So he said, the Constitution says we should not establish a religion. Congress shall not establish a religion. It doesn't say states couldn't establish a religion, right? Now, this is nonsense. This is not how the law works. Texas cannot declare itself legally a Christian state. Florida, where there's a lot of Scientologists, cannot declare itself legally a Scientology state, right? And I think Jeff Sessions knew that this was not true and said it anyway. If he didn't know it wasn't true, or if he knew it was true and he didn't say it, right, it's disturbing either way, right? So the reason for this has to do with what's called the incorporation of the Bill of Rights. So originally, the Bill of Rights were understood only to apply to the federal government. So originally, freedom of speech protected you from the feds. It didn't protect you from the states, right? After the Civil War, they passed the 14th Amendment, and they said, well, states cannot pass laws that violate people's constitutional rights. And then finally, in 1947, the Supreme Court officially declared the First Amendment does apply to the states. So that would include the Establishment Clause, right? This is a meme, right? Why didn't we stop the school shooting? Well, because God has been banned from the school. This is another kind of myth I want to address to people. So the Supreme Court case Abington v. Shemp. This is Justice Clark. He says, it might well be said that one's education is not complete without a study of comparative religion or the history of religion and its advancement of civilization. So the Supreme Court never said you can't talk about religion in schools. They actually encourage it, right? What they said is you can't force students to pray, and you can't force them to do devotional reading of the Bible. You can't read the Bible in school the way you would read it at church. So most states, including Texas, do require learning about religions. They have to know about the history of Christianity and so forth, right? This could include reading the Bible and other texts, but only for their historical and cultural significance, right? Lemon v. Kurtzman. So it's a Supreme Court case that ruled that Pennsylvania could not reimburse the salaries of Catholic school teachers. This is an issue that we're now revisiting here in Texas. They came up with guidelines for determining whether or not something violates the Establishment Clause. That was called the Lemon Test. The Lemon Test is important for what I'm going to after Lemon, right, the guy in the lawsuit. Currently, the Supreme Court is trying to get rid of the Lemon Test. The Trump-appointed Supreme Court is saying we don't want this anymore. We want to adjudicate this differently. But originally they said for the government to do something that appears to promote a religion, they have to have a secular purpose for doing it, right? It cannot have the primary effect of either advancing or inhibiting a religion, and it must not result in excessive government entanglement with religions. That would be things like determining, say, which Christian denomination is true, right, or something like this. So a case that kind of shows this off, and we're going to get to these monuments, Lynch v. Donnelly, 1984, also known as the Pawtucket Creche case, concerned whether the city of Pawtucket could erect a creche for Christmas. Right? It's Christmas. We want to put up an image of the Holy Family, a manger, on public property, right, that's funded by taxes. Right? This is the ugliest creche I've ever seen. This was the actual creche, right? Now this is Pawtucket in 1984. So this was very important when this goes to the Supreme Court. So there's the manger, right? There's the nativity scene. You also see here a Christmas tree. You see reindeer. There's these other kinds of symbols there. Okay. So 5-4, the Supreme Court says the creche is okay, it's acceptable. And they say there is a secular legislative purpose to this, right, which is money, right? People will come and they'll look at the Christmas display and they'll spend money, right? And they also say Christmas isn't necessarily a Christian holiday, right? Christmas could also be a secular holiday. And the fact that this had reindeer and teddy bears and other stuff like this shows that this is a secular Christmas display and not a Christian Christmas display. Here's law professor Jay Wexler. He says this endorsement test makes judges render decisions that are more like interior decorating than constitutional law, which is absolutely true, right? So this kind of goes back to that first point that we started with, right? How you define religion determines how all of this applies. After this precedent, there is a Supreme Court case about the Ten Commandments monuments up at the Texas Capitol, and they make a similar argument that can stay because the context of other monuments around it makes it a secular monument somehow instead of a religious one. Some law professors said this is patently ridiculous. Of course the Ten Commandments is a religious symbol, but this is the game that we play, right? So, something can be a religion or not depending on the argument and the politics of the person making the argument. Why don't I stop there? And I'm happy to chat with people more after class if this was interesting to you. Thank you so much.
Sorry to have to cut you short. That was so enjoyable, and thanks for your passion. I like that energy. We're running late, so looks like we're not going to have time for Q&A. We're going to lunch. Now, remember, next week is the potluck, but today we'll be going to lunch. Professor, are you going to go to lunch with us? Okay. Okay, thank you. So we changed again. Sorry, Richard. I know Richard just wrote it. We have another restaurant to go to now. All these changes today, I'm trying to keep up. We're going to La Tapatia, very close to here, right on Richmond, on the corner of Richmond and Woodhead. So just west on Richmond Drive, not far. 1749 Richmond Avenue. We're going to be going there directly after the meeting here in a couple minutes. So join us for lunch. Great time to get to know people and to talk. And real quick announcement, and Tim's going to come up in a minute. Next week, besides our potluck, which I talk about all the time, very important, we're having, rather than a main talk and speaker, we're going to have the Oasis Town Hall with the board members here at Oasis and the committee and department heads. So if you want to know what direction we're headed as a community, you have questions, we're just going to kind of lay it all out. And I'm really excited about next week, talk about our vision, what we're about, what we believe in, whether we're trying to take over the world or not trying to take over the world. But so just come on out next week for our town hall. So Tim, our treasurer, is going to come up.
Howdy, everyone. All right, we are in a rush, so I'm just going to be real fast about this. We have 1 week remaining on our 2024 Spring Pledge Drive. Our total take right now is 7,472 with a total goal of 10,000. So we're almost there, everybody. As a reminder, that's a minimum of $75 will go towards get 100% matched, up to a maximum of 1,000 per person. Please give if you can. This is the time to do it. And that's all I had.
All right, we have a few minutes. Eric, you still here? Where's our musician? Come on up, guys. And it looks like we have time for at least one song, if that's okay. Thank you so much. I'm still going to steal your voice from you when you're not looking.
It's leaving anyway. Part where I noodle while Wayne's getting plugged in. Thank you. Thanks, Wayne Wilkerson.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Next time you come, you got to do some AC/DC for me.